Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome. Virginia, I'm Bettina Lawton, your host. And tonight I have with me Jerry Foltz. He is a candidate for the House of Delegates. He is a first-time candidate. He is running against a long-term incumbent who's having his own challenges this year. But it's the 40th House of Delegates district, and we've got a map, and eventually we'll get that up behind me, and you can see that it's kind of a very long, odd-shaped map. I suspect that has to do with some gerrymandering that went on after the last census. But Jerry, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So I want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our viewers. Who is Jerry Foltz?
I'm a 17-year resident of Centerville, Virginia. I'm pastor in the United Church of Christ, officially retired from full-time, what we call called ministry or permanent ministry. But I continue to minister in many ways. And actually, I see myself in a transition from ministering in the church community to ministering or serving the wider community. And I've always been something of a community activist in the churches I've served, 5 churches altogether in my 44 years of ministry. And this is an extension of how I want to help families in the community with all the pressure on them of all kinds, and we can talk about that. I care about families. I have always done that, so this is more of that.
Now, you also served at the Atlantic region level. You were sort of helping a bunch of, like 40 some odd churches or something.
Yes, 7.5 years I was a regional minister serving in the Central Atlantic Conference, the actual name, mostly Maryland churches, and I was from Maryland, so that was a nice feel to be back in my home state for a while. And I ministered to the 40 churches, their ministers, their pastors, helped them in times of transition and some bumps in the road and negotiating salaries and all kinds of little itty-bitty things, and some of them were pretty critical. There were some trying moments, and we weathered all that, and I retired from that, and my position went away. They had to downsize as it was, so it worked out.
No one could replace you.
Exactly.
Excellent. Now, you also do something with the fire department, right?
Right.
What is that about?
Well, when I came to Centerville in 1996, I came to organize a new congregation in the United Church of Christ, and we looked around for a place to meet to start with, and lo and behold, there was the fire station. This older bingo hall, what we call the Pine Room, was available on Sunday mornings. And so we rented that, started meeting there, and then a few months later, someone suggested I think about being a chaplain for the fire department. I thought, well, that's really interesting. I've been chaplain in hospitals, volunteer chaplain. My father was a charter member of our community volunteer fire department when I was growing up, and I rode the fire engine to fires and that kind of thing. So it spoke to me. And so I've been chaplain for over 16 years with the fire department, Centerville Volunteer Fire Department, which also made me an associate volunteer chaplain with Fairfax County Fire and Rescue, which I'm still active with.
Excellent. Okay. And you did get, you were named Citizens of the Year by the Centerville Historic Foundation in 2011 for some work you and your wife were doing out in that area as well.
Right. And she deserves a little bit more of the credit, but I was glad to stand with her, and I've certainly supported and worked with her in the Immigration Forum, Centerville Immigration Forum. It was started back in 2007, simply to have conversation about immigration issues and concerns and rumors and needs. We met monthly, and then by 3 years ago, we were challenged with the opportunity to start a labor resource center, as we called it. And so after a year of organizing and raising funds and helping the workers draw up their own rules of conduct in English and Spanish, we opened the center. It's been over a year and a half now. So that was a part of our award, and we certainly accepted it on behalf of so many other volunteers and organizations and churches and everybody else that was in on it. We couldn't have done it alone, that's for sure.
Well, there were some problems years ago, not that many years ago, with Herndon and immigration. When you were doing this work over in Centerville, did you find the same problems? Was there a lot of resistance to establishing this labor center?
Not as much. There was some, and we really were doing it in response to the experience in Herndon. We even modeled the resource center initially after the Herndon model, which worked really well, but outside of the center itself in Herndon, there was a lot of resistance and even some outside groups that came in and I think caused difficulties, and the town leadership changed. And at the same time in Manassas, there was the kind of restrictions on immigrants, and there was some great unpleasantness, and we did not want any of that to happen in Centerville if we could help it. We were a mixed community, many immigrants. We looked at the census statistics from the year 2000 and saw how the population consisted of quite a large immigrant population, Asian especially, but also Hispanic. And we wanted to be able to work together and build community. That's still our goal with the Immigration Forum, which still is organized. My wife is still president of the board of directors. And the Labor Resource Center is simply its biggest project.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this, why you're running, is sort of to continue your serving? Is that what I understand you to say?
Right. And I want to serve the community. And with the experience of the Immigration Forum, with the goal of building community, that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to help build consensus around any kind of challenge or problem, and not unnecessarily divide community. I find too much divisive politics, and it bothers me, both national and state. And I'd like to be someone who can offer an alternative way to make decisions.
You think that can work down at the House of Delegates? They seem to be pretty animated and confrontational down there.
It seems like it. It's worth a try. It's worth a big try, and I'll give it all I have. I did serve on a school board in New Jersey, elected position for 3 years. It was nonpartisan, but very conflicted.
Yeah, school boards tend to be. I will say that.
We were so divided that they couldn't decide on a president, so they elected me the second year to be president. I was the lowest common denominator, and they cooperated with me somewhat, for the most part. But that was an experience of trying to build consensus. It was hard, and sometimes it didn't work very well, but we moved on. And I have a tendency not to take opposition personally. If people say no to me, I thank them for telling me and move on, or figure out another way to do it. Or if somebody even insults me, I think, well, they must have misunderstood.
Well, that's probably a good approach to things. It keeps you able to keep moving forward on some issues.
I hope so.
So what are the kind of main issues that are going on in your district?
Well, transportation is probably the biggest overall, most commonly mentioned issue. My opponent, Tim Hugo, has voted, according to my research, against all the proposals to improve transportation and reduce congestion in Northern Virginia and in our district over the 10 years, and offered no viable alternatives. So that's where we are. We can look at how much is improved in 10 years. And he voted against the last proposal, the bipartisan transportation funding bill, which passed in spite of his no vote. And we're dealing with the funds now being generated from that to reduce congestion. And it was a great experience in a compromise. All too rare to have a compromise solution in legislation. So
you would have supported that bill had you been in the House of Delegates?
I would have. I've not liked every part of it. I think we can still tidy it up a little bit. The a fine on my wife's Prius doesn't seem very appropriate.
That hybrid tax really has got people up here exercised, I'll say that.
Yeah, it targets Northern Virginia, and we're already being targeted by raising some more of our own money with extra sales tax. But it's all part of a compromise. You don't get everything, you have to give up something, but you come up with something.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now, the other issue that was going on down in the last couple of sessions that seemed to create a great deal of conflict were issues surrounding women's rights, their reproductive rights specifically. Where do you stand on those kinds of issues?
Well, it's very upsetting to me that I thought we had accomplished a lot with women's rights over the last few decades, and now somehow they're being whittled away, women's rights to make their own health choices according to their own conscience, their doctor, and if they want to consult their priest or minister, fine. But to impose and take away their rights statewide doesn't seem fair at all. And especially harmful are the lower income women who were benefiting from all the health care that the Planned Parenthood clinics could offer. And yet those are being closed down, and I think it's very harmful and unfair. So.
Well, talking about health care as well, I mean, where do you stand on this proposed Medicaid expansion? The House of Delegates seem to have put in some kind of a committee or something to look at it, and hopefully they'll reach some kind of conclusion.
Right. Well, I'm certainly in favor of it. Right now there's 400,000 people, by estimates that I keep seeing, of the lower income people that have no access to regular health care. Their only alternative is to wait until they're sick enough to go to the emergency room, where it's expensive, and sometimes it's really too late to return to good health or even survive. That's the really tragic part of it. So 400,000 people can be insured a year from now. They could have set it for January, that would be sooner. Right. And we will get reimbursements from the federal government for that coverage from tax money we've already paid from Virginia. So for the 6 months until it goes into effect, we're not benefiting from those funds, and it will actually overall reduce hospital costs. If emergency room services are not needed, and people have access to regular health care, they'll be healthier, our communities will be healthier, and overall, if you match all the pockets and budgets, it'll be a reduction in overall medical costs, or at least there'll be a control over the increases. That's more fair and honest.
Well, where do you, the other issue that I understand some people have had is with our current voter ID laws. That was another big issue down in the General Assembly, particularly this last year, with imposing photo ID requirements for next year, not this year, for next year. Do you think that this voter fraud allegation has any real validity to it, or how do you feel about all those types of bills?
I don't think it's valid. I haven't seen any example of any voter fraud attempted or accomplished. So it's a false issue, but it's a diversion from what could be other things that would be more important to work on. And it's a handicap, and really will make it harder for some people to vote who just don't seem to have a government ID, they don't have a driver's license. With all the alternatives you could have, someone last year was coming in, oh, I forgot my voter cards. Well, just use your driver's license. That works, and that's so handy. I mean, but to have just something special instead of the alternatives, you could even use a utility bill with your address on it. And really, for the most part, our voters vote in their own home precincts, and the people that work there most often know the people, and we know each other, and it's like a community experience. It's not all strangers, trying to rip each other off. It just seems so unnecessary to have all this.
Well, I want to mention in the last 20 seconds or so that we have here, there was a Washington Post editorial challenging your opponent's ethics. Apparently he charges $40,000 or so to his campaign committee. Do you think the ethics laws in Virginia need to be increased? And you got 5 seconds to tell me.
Yes, I think so, absolutely. The reporting needs to be more extensive, just like what I had to report in declaring my economic interest and my wife's and anyone else in my household.
Okay. Well, we will leave it at that. I want to thank you very much, Jerry, for coming.
Thanks for letting me be here.
Absolutely.
Okay.